to our forecast map now and take a closer look at this ever-changing race over the last month. This is essentially the old map. It's so old, we were using it about a month ago. And at the time, we used to say that the Democrats started with 226 electoral votes, but the Republicans had a slight advantage, 235. And there were 6 toss-up states representing 77 electoral votes. What are the 6? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Those are the yellow states that were there. But something happened. A lot of things happened over the last month, and the race was reset. So now we have a new starting point for the map. So let me reset it. 241 for the Dems is now where we will start. 219 for the Republicans, 78 toss-ups. We still have 6 toss-up states, but they've changed. Look what happened in North Carolina. It went from lean red to toss-up, right? Look what happened in Michigan. Went from toss-up to lean blue. Now, before we talk about this in some detail, what's a scenario that we could use this data and project what might, keyword might, happen in the presidential race? What if you had no toss-ups, no lean states, and you just took the polling averages we had and gave it to the person who's ahead? Let's do it in the swing states, okay? So Pennsylvania, I'm going to start right here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania right now, and the average is +1 for Harris, right? So that would be lean to the blue side, right? Wisconsin also is lean blue. So we're going over to Wisconsin now, which is in yellow. Harris up about 3 points, average of the polls there. So we'll lean it in to the blue side. North Carolina, funny, not only is it a toss-up state now, but Harris, the average is up about a point in North Carolina. So we'll lean that as well. Look what happened when we did so, top left. She's already over the top. You only need 270. She here, in this scenario, would be at 286. The other states are all leaning red. Trump's up a little less than 3 points, probably in Georgia, so we'll lean that red. Arizona's basically tied. I actually looked earlier, and Trump was literally up 0.1, so we'll lean that slightly red. And Nevada's up a little bit, up about an average of 1 point in the poll. So 286 Dems, okay, 252 GOP. Not saying this is going to happen, but it could happen. One of the scenarios that we're looking at. All right, let's talk about this some more. And before we talk about it in any detail, we actually have some news that's just come in. This was on social media a few minutes ago from former President Trump. If you believe what he said, and this is what he's just written, looks like, yep, we will have a debate between Trump and Harris on the 10th of September. I've reached an agreement with the radical left Democrats for this debate. Comrade Kamala Harris, as he calls her, they say it's going to be on ABC, goes down, badmouths ABC in the next line. But key details here, September 10th, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And look at this, the rules will be the same as the last CNN debate. So I guess if Trump is to be believed here, that means muted mics, right? That was the debate about the debate. The debate will be, quote, stand up. Candidates cannot bring out their quote, unquote, cheat sheets, says the former president just minutes ago. So a lot of news here, a changing race, a debate that looks like it will happen. Let's bring it all to Scott Tranter. Scott's the head of data science at DDHQ. He's essentially the brains behind those numbers. I just push the buttons on the map and things appear, but Scott comes up with the forecast to make it happen. So I think it's interesting about the debate. We'll get to it. 56% chance of Harris winning. This is different than polls. Polls, basically, to me, I understand them as like a snapshot in time. Like, all right, this is how the race looks now. A forecast tells me you think this is what's more likely to happen in November. Explain.
And it takes in more information. So not just polling. We take in voter registration. We take in fundraising. We take in historical factors like incumbency. Have they won there in the past? All these different factors that polls just don't capture, as you point out.
All right, I'm going to look at some of the states. First of all, on the tablet here, we show the odds. Okay, so the odds are 56% for Harris, right? So again, if I'm looking at the weather forecast, I can bring it up here, and I see a number like this. I say, you know what, it might rain if they said 56%, but you know what, it might not. So Trump said 44%. If I see a number, this is just me, 65, 70%, say, oh, it probably will rain. So I don't know if politics are the same. I'll ask you about that in a second, but let me look at some states. This is fascinating to me. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, right? We always look at these big three, especially. Talk to me, Scott, about Michigan, that all of a sudden Kamala Harris has a 67% chance of winning. That's why we have it lean blue on our map. I mean, that change percentage-wise went up by 14. What's going on in Michigan? That's huge.
That's a wholesale change, as you point out. She's had a lot of great polling out of Michigan, and she's widened up her lead there. Michigan, fundamentally, a few more Democrats and Republicans registered there. Democrats have done better in that state the last few cycles. So the forecast takes that into account. But really, it's the polling that has moved that probability up, and she's doing better among African-American voters, which is reflected there.
That's interesting. We're going to talk about that, I think, a little bit later in the show. Wayne County, Michigan, turnout. Will she surpass Not just Biden, will she surpass what Hillary Clinton did do and do better than she did in 2016? Big question for the Harris campaign. What about the debate? The news just came out from Trump. Again, we'll wait to see what Harris says, but he says we're going to have this debate. How much do debates usually move numbers like the one we're talking about historically?
Well, the last debate we saw swapped out candidates. So look, I don't know that we're going to see that massive of a movement in this next debate, but we're talking about an election on the margins, and even a few points one way or the other could make or break the candidate. Historically, they only move a few points, but we'll see what happens here. I think this one will be even higher watched than the last one.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking the last one. I was thinking back like 2020, the first one with Trump, when Trump was interrupting everyone. But you make a very fair point. If it's anything like the last one, we're going to have a whole new race. Maybe who knows who'll be running in November. But that debate, Trump, a lot of headlines around it. Remember, Chris Wallace was the moderator, and everybody talked about it afterwards. Do you remember how much something like that moves a race? Just a few points?
Just a few points, 2 or 3 points. Because again, America, most of the voters come make up their minds. There's anywhere from 5 to 10% of voters that'll watch a debate and change their mind. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but as you pointed out, some of these states are only within a couple points anyway. So these things all matter, even though they're small movements.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about, and I just put it up on the big wall over here, the Senate and the House before I let you go. Because again, this is interesting to me too. We have Senate GOP chance at 67%. We have House GOP chance 56%. So the Republicans are favored in both. You and I have talked about this before. The Senate's just the map. It's tough for the Democrats. It'd be surprising. That's why it's still 2/3 Republican. They could do it, but they'd pretty much have to run the table. What about the House? Talk to me about where the House is right now. With Harris surging, I would think maybe the Democrats think they have a pretty good chance.
Yeah, look, the Democrats are feeling good. There was some good reporting off the Hill yesterday about that. Structurally, the Republicans are in a slightly better position simply because of fundraising and polling. But that is one number that I can assure you that is going to bounce around over the next couple months. As we get more polling, more campaigning, more fundraising, I would not be surprised if we're talking about the House 2 weeks from now, and that's a 56%, but it's not red, it's blue.
Yep, I think
that's going to...
I have the Senate. This is the 2020. Oh, that's the 2020 Senate map. I could bring up the other map in a moment as well, maybe if it comes up for me. But that's the 2020 Senate map in where we were then. Where we are now, talk about they need to run the table, right? They need to win, like John Tester's Montana seat. They need to win that seat, which is kind of leaning red right now. They need to win Michigan, right? They need to win everything that's up for grabs.
Pretty much, it all comes down to West Virginia and Montana. If the Republicans in either of those two, which they're favored to win both those, West Virginia by a lot and definitely favored in Montana, the Senate is theirs. And so the Democrats need to pull off 2 big upsets there. And then they need to hold off challengers in Nevada and Arizona, which they probably will. But even if they hold off challengers in Nevada and Arizona, it's not looking good for them in West Virginia and Montana. And then we haven't even talked about Ohio yet, which is probably a flip. Well, that's why the probability is so good for the Republicans in the Senate.
Now, when you put these odds together, you didn't do. It's interesting, and I'll make this kind of the final point. You didn't do it for a long time, and to me, that sounded reasonable, right? Because it was so crazy that you couldn't even project. And now you're not necessarily saying Harris is going to win. You're not saying that at all. But you're saying that she's slightly more likely to win, like a little more than 50%. But what was that like? You didn't just have, there was just no data to be believed. I mean, you paused for a while.
Yeah, so think of it as a campaign reset, right? Like we had a campaign reset where a whole candidate took themselves out of the race and put a new candidate in. And so we had to rebuild and get brand new polling because all the polling we had on Joe Biden and Trump, not worth anything anymore. I understand VP Harris was the vice president, but the voters look at you differently when you're a candidate. So we had to build up that data and then put it into a coherent forecast. And it took us about a month to do that. And we had to be sure she would be the nominee, which she obviously was. But in the beginning, we weren't even sure. It's
really interesting to look through. You go to thehill.com is where I go, and I look through all of this on a day-by-day basis. So Scott and the guys at DDHQ updated. So we'll have you back, of course. And we thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Scott.